Previously on Law and Beyond Order, Jordan burnt Peterson's lawsuit against the professional organization that he is a member of regarding his lack of professionalism on social media sites has been dismissed by Ontario courts.
What am I supposed to do about that? The answer is, well, we're going to appeal the decision. I will take this to the Supreme Court. I don't think that any judges will have either the wisdom or the courage to rule about this properly, except at the Supreme Court level.
All right, well, we know his game master plan is to get to the Supreme Court and hope that it's as stacked as ours is. That they will have the wisdom and the courage to stand for him in his truthiness.
The Supreme Court has just ruled that it will not hear an appeal on a case involving retired clinical psychologist Jordan Peterson.
This video made possible thanks to the continuing support of viewers, patrons, and PayPal pals like you. Thanks! Hello, and welcome back to this humble cognitive psychologist updating you on the latest lobster news. And the latest is that Jordan burnt Peterson got his appeal in front of the Supreme Court of Canada, and they were like, pass, no, swipe left. Seeing as how his professional identity is on the line, like being able to call himself a clinical psychologist, he's big mad about this. This is future cast, remembering that past cast forgot to give the extra context here in case you're new. As I mentioned, I am a cognitive psychologist, and part of my thing here on YouTube has been going through Peterson's life advice books and checking the references, because sometimes he can play fast and loose with things, like the melting lobster brains. That's my go-to example because it is just so absolutely wrong for how anything works. So that's why I have a interest in Peterson's doings and his professional standing. This is several years of stuff and developments, so my plan is before we get to his announcement video where he talks with his daughter Mikhaila about his response to the Supreme Court's decision, I was going to review the highlights of the last time we talked about this, where he took it to the Court of Ontario. So we'll do that and then get to the announcement video. All right, so the big overall last update was the Canadian Psychologists of Ontario were sued by him because he was being required to take a social media training so he could present himself in a more professional manner. He sued them to be like, no, that's against my free speech. The college has been receiving complaints since 2018, but for the most part, we're just letting it slide until there's enough of them and his behavior was so egregious that they felt they had to do something. So he was given the, you need some remedial training here in fall, maybe summer of 2022. In September, he wrote a very long letter back to them saying he wasn't going to do it, and he'd already, quote, implemented a solution, including having a bunch of experts help him with his social media-ing. And they were like, no, they haven't helped you get better at this, so here's some suggestions for who you could do this training with. So his response was, no, and I am legally prepared to die on this hill. So about a month later, when they issued him a SCRP, or a Specified Continuing Education or Remedial Program, under his discipline and other proceeding section of their website, he was not happy. And they noted that he was potentially doing damage to the profession as a whole with how he was acting. The SCRP had some suggestions for coaches he could work with, and a timeline that he needed to do this by, and that if he didn't carry through with it, it could, quote, result in an allegation of professional misconduct. So then the central issue with this lawsuit is whether or not the SCRP was a reasonable and justified action. The judge who wrote the opinion for the dismissal said that Peterson is obligated to follow the codes and standards of this professional organization he is a voluntary member of. His argument that he was tweeting off-duty doesn't hold weight because him being a clinical psychologist and recognized as such is part of his branding and part of his recognition. And the sort of mic drop moment from the legal document was, quote, Dr. Peterson cannot have it both ways. He cannot speak as a member of a regulated profession without taking responsibility for the risk of harm that flows from him speaking in that trusted capacity. So it was dismissed. He had to pay the respondent cost, as agreed, in the amount of $25,000. Ha ha ha. So that is where we were with things. Let's see where we are now. Ooh. Let us start with the tweet that kicked this off. And my voice is not warmed up enough, so I'm not going to do the Peterson voice. You're welcome or sorry. So, quote, yelling, "Update re Canada Supreme Court. The court has rejected my appeal regarding the decision of the Ontario College of Psychologists to subject me to indefinite re-education at CPBA Ontario, primarily for publicly opposing the butchers and liars subjecting children to sterilization and mutilation." No period. No periods anywhere. I am also required to pay whatever court costs the college accrued in relation to my appeal. I am now bereft of options on the legal front in Canada. I guess it's on with the show. This is a hill that's worth not so much dying on as retaking. And now, boys and girls, the gloves are off. I'll talk this over later today with @Mikhaila Fuller and release that. And before we get into that, there is an Izzy. Just vibing in the warm cube, heated cube. She's there.
So how are you doing? What have you been up to recently?
Well, let's go with what's down first. We got back from some funerals, so that was rough. The same week we launched Peterson Academy, and that's up in a big way. And so that's gone great, and that's quite fun. We have.
Am I mistaken? I don't think the Peterson Academy's technically launched yet. Not that I've been keeping track or anything. Yeah, no, it's just pre-enrollment. Where are they saying they launched it already? Reasonable cost. The Peterson Academy is $450 a year. In theory, you're going to get courses, AI-based quizzes, or like quizzes generated from an AI, and more courses updated regularly. And we'll talk about the Peterson Academy in another video because that is a whole thing.
So a brief overview. You've been being investigated by the Board of Psychologists in Ontario. This investigation is caused by people around the world filing complaints against comments you've made on social media about the government, trans issues, and things you said on Joe Rogan. You appealed, I think the last time we did an update, you were appealing to the Supreme Court of Canada to see if you could avoid the mandated re-education that the College of Psychologists wants you to.
She's using a teleprompter. I mean, it's a lot of info for her to get out for him, but yeah, she's using a teleprompter. Interesting.
For everybody who doesn't know, that re-education means they're assigning someone they choose to train you.
More than that, they want to retrain me with regard to how I conduct myself as a public intellectual, let's say.
But he's not just a public intellectual, he's a clinical psychologist.
So, and that retraining is, of course, at my expense with their deemed expert. They have someone who styles herself, I believe, a social media expert.
Whatever the hell that is.
This makes it sound like he knows who this trainer is, doesn't it?
And apparently they believe that her intercession in my affairs will bring me to heel. That's the plan.
Of course he has to frame it like that. The point of the SCRP is to get him as a registered professional with this professional organization to act like one in public forums like Twitter. But of course, this is a personal attack in an Orwellian state against his intellectual dark webbiness. I don't know.
We appealed that through the Court of Appeal first in Canada, now at the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court announced today that they rejected my appeal and they want me to pay court costs for the College of Psychologists.
Okay, so I'm guessing this was the appeal process and he was getting permission to appeal and they rejected that. And then they were able to refer back down to the previous decision by the provincial court to say, like, you're responsible for legal costs here.
They've become radically politicized, just like everything else in recent years. And
is it they who have become radically politicized, or is it perhaps you, Peterson?
The college obviously has members who are none too pleased with me for being right about things. And
yes, that's why they're mad, because you're right. Yes, that was a good laugh. I know, I woke you up. He's responsible for paying her all the pets for waking her up from her nap. Oh my god. Oh, I can't with him.
Now it's time to be re-educated. And
it seems like he's conceiving of this as they're going to try to brainwash him into the progressive cult. When I imagine the bottom line is more, we just need you to stop being a bigot on Twitter or in other public spaces. Please, maybe drop the misinformation about things that you're not an expert in, like climate change. But really, can you stop with the harmful tweets? I imagine part of it is going to be you can hold whatever opinions you want to hold, and in not public forum settings, you can say whatever the fuck you want to say to your heart's content. But as long as you are conveying yourself and portraying yourself as a professional clinical psychologist, you need to abide by these rules and maybe just keep your mouth shut.
What have been the accusations? They take three forms. You alluded to them. I've been very vociferous in my objection to the butchery of children.
No, actually, they've been pretty courageous in opposing bullshit like the stuff you're slinging. Dr. Turbin on Twitter recently released a book basically addressing all of the things concerning trans and non-binary youths and gender non-conforming youths. And yeah, I think doctors already had a hard enough job, and psychologists and psychiatrists, in trying to counter all of the bullshit, misinformation, and disinformation coming from Peterson and Rowling and all the other TERFs or gender criticals or whatever. And yeah, they're kind of the courageous ones. And really, if you want to talk about like true fucking bastions of wholehearted bravery, I guess, or courage, are the trans and non-binary people right now in the way the world is. Like, their rights are being chipped away at on a regular basis. And like, women's rights are fucked. Maybe we'll get some ground back on that, but I'm at least able to still see like an OBGYN in some places, like especially for youth in like Florida or Texas. Like, it's pretty fucking bleak. So he can fuck off with this.
And then I criticized Justin Trudeau, which is something I'm actually pretty happy about, because he's an incompetent narcissist who's made Canada a much worse place, and he's certainly not done with that yet.
My understanding is that all the legal decisions, the CPO decisions that they move forward with for the SCIRP were not based on his criticizing Trudeau. That didn't factor into it at all. It was about the anti-trans tweets and telling people to kill yourself or other things of that nature. And also some of the stuff he said on Rogan. Nothing about Trudeau. This wasn't a political hit.
I criticized some of the members of his staff, and I made some comments about climate on...
Yeah, no. Okay, so that part is fair. He did, I believe he called a member of Trudeau's staff a self-aggrandizing thing, if I'm remembering the phrasing correctly, because I think they're non-binary. And so, of course, he couldn't abide by that and had to say something. That is the sliver of truth in that part.
I'm doing something unethical by pointing out the fact that the climate scam is a preposterous pack of lies generated by people whose fundamental aim is nothing but power and control. And I would also point out that since I did that, the climate apocalypse narrative is looking increasingly shaky. Let's put it that way.
How does he fucking figure that? How on earth does he figure the climate apocalypse, whatever, is looking shaky? Like, I saw something about the jet stream possibly spinning out or like dying soon. Like in the next handful of years because of the shit that's going on. Like, stuff is pretty fucking bleak, Peterson. Izzy didn't like my yelling, so she left. On the climate change front, some more news recently released a video specifically addressing Peterson on his views on this, so check that out.
And so I'm sort of morbidly curious about that.
We all are.
Who are they going to get to do this? How are they going to proceed?
I thought we already knew who. You said you already know who's assigned to you. So who are they getting to do it? Which is it?
So that's the situation. On to the re-education camp.
Oh my god, this isn't the gulags, Peterson. You're not being shipped off to Siberia to fucking whatever because you didn't think about the party. Like, come on.
And I'm going to comply with it because I could tell them to go to hell. I'm not that thrilled about being a member of their club.
I'm going to comply with it because I'm not that thrilled being part of the college. Huh?
Like, I'm not going to let a pack of half-witted ideological jackanapes steal something from me under the guise of moral intervention that I worked very hard to attain, that was difficult to attain, that was at one point very valid, and that I have served with distinction and appropriately the entire time.
The thing is, he hasn't really served with distinction for almost a decade, because it started with the Bill C-16. That's what it started with, and then he caught some media attention, he released 12 Rules for Life, and he finally got that media attention that it seems like he'd been trying to court for quite some time. If you look at his, whatever they were, TVO appearances with like the hat and stuff, it's something that he'd been trying to pursue for a bit. So then he got it and started to affiliate with certain circles that, you know, amplified certain parts of his ideology and perspective on things, and so it was just a hand in a glove situation for like the trans issues. Yeah, no, he hasn't been an upstanding member of the college for a bit.
Absolutely incumbent on psychologists to do what I've done, which is to stand up and say that there's no evidence whatsoever for any of the claims that are being made by the gender-affirming, ideological, monstrous sterilizers and mutilators of children.
For him to say there's no evidence is just appalling. The college is being so gentle and forgiving with him that he can sit there and say that fully believing he's in the right. He is doing harm to the image of the psychology profession in the counseling or clinical front. He is.
And if that happens to be something that I'm being gone after for, it's like, bring it on, you sons of bitches. And we'll see how that plays out. So,
bring it on, you sons of bitches. Let's see how that plays out. Like, we are. This is fuck around, find out. Peterson edition. So far, it's that you lose. You need to stop being a dick on Twitter. But no, I'm gonna sit here in my surprisingly boring suit compared to some we've seen recently. And no.
You know, I don't need to spend 30 hours talking to someone about how I should reform everything I know.
Everything he knows. Although, I think it was Rule 2 in 12 Rules for Life. He said that the sex binary of masculine and feminine is the fundamental fact that, like, fundamental truth or something that everything else is built on. So if he conceives all knowledge as coming with that as a foundation, yeah, maybe it would ask him to reconsider that. Or at least, I imagine whoever is given the distinct pleasure of trying to do this with Peterson is just going to be like, you know, believe whatever you want to believe, but in your professional presentations, like, drop it. And then he's going to be like, no, the butchers, the blah, blah, blah. This is almost certainly going to result in a situation where he quits the college. I don't see it turning out another way. He's just dragging it out.
I'll play the bloody charade out till the end.
No, he's not.
Now, what should Canadians think about this? There's a hard question, because you're between a rock and a hard place now.
This is a long clip, but you need to see it completely, so we're going to break it up by summarizing.
You can either assume that I'm the right-wing scoundrel, unable to control my tongue, that the left-wing radicals who don't like me would like you to presume. Perhaps they're right.
We are.
Or you can assume that the Canadian judicial system and the regulatory system and the legislative system to some degree, as well as the education system and the healthcare system, has become so bloody corrupt that it can't be trusted in its dealings with you as individuals or in its dealings with professionals such as myself.
Which seems more likely? Like Occam's razor. Is it that he's wrong and he's has some outdated beliefs on things? Or is it that the entire Canadian government and all of its different branches and the healthcare system and the everything is operating in concert against him and other people who share his beliefs?
The jig is up, boys and girls, and the Supreme Court of Canada itself can no longer be trusted to bear the responsibility to make the decisions that are appropriate to its domain.
I seem to remember he had glowing praise for the Supreme Court in the last update, that they were the top of the hierarchy and they have the integrity to do what is right. So of course he's singing a different tune now.
I don't think that any judges will have either the wisdom or the courage to rule about this properly, except at the Supreme Court level.
Although, to be fair,
And I'm not particularly optimistic about that either.
He's not optimistic.
What am I claiming? That I'm right and they're wrong? Yep, that's what I'm claiming. I don't even need the designation, even though they're not going to take it from me without a war.
What war, Peterson? What battlefield haven't you fought on? Are you gonna do the skirp or are you not? Like, it's gonna be such a nothing burger, but he's gonna have to spin it up into this huge thing.
Here's the situation that confronts you, Canadians. Your professionals are now mandated by law and their own regulatory boards to lie to you.
By law. By law. Citation needed.
That's all your teachers, that's all your engineers, that's all your lawyers, that's all your physicians.
Oh, he's talking about the gender stuff again. But then to say that doctors and engineers are having to lie to you about this, presumably this, because I don't, maybe engineers are having to lie about climate change? Maybe? What?
You know, and lots of my friends took me to task because of the harshness with which I said them, let's say. How harsh should you be when you're talking about
Butchers?
the mutilation and sterilization of confused children? What?
So we went through a lot of this in the irreversible damage series. I have whichever corner, I never remember. It's not sterilization and mutilation of confused children. If you get to the surgery point, you've had to jump through a lot of hoops and a lot of checks and a lot of interviews and a lot of legal gatekeeping to get to that point. It's not the situation he's painting it to be. It's just not.
Yeah, well, the thing is, they're not trying to re-educate me. It's complete bloody rubbish. They know.
He keeps calling it re-education, but they're not trying to re-educate him. And I, again, stopped it too soon. I just... make it make sense.
They know perfectly well that, A, they're not going to be able to hire anyone to do that. I can't imagine who they're going to hire to do this to begin with. Who would even agree to do that? Like, it's so... I guess I could...
So, again, I think the SCRP that was up had suggestions for who he could work with. And I don't know if it was on there. I imagine they'd want to keep that private because he's more than willing to unleash his lobster army against this. After the Supreme Court decision came down, or the rejection, I should say, he tweeted out the contact or like the website info for putting complaints in, and they have to investigate all complaints. And he didn't say, go make complaints against the CPO for censoring me. It was the subtext. It was obvious that's what he was doing, as he's done a couple times before. So I can't imagine they would release the contact info of who's going to do this, although I'm sure Peterson will.
I guess I could put forward a warning to whoever wants to do that. Don't do it. You have no idea what this is going to do to your life. Don't get involved in this.
Why?
Don't come and re-educate me. Your life will never be the same.
Don't do it. Why? Why, Peterson? Why should somebody not do this? Say it. Say your reason why they shouldn't. Oh, it feels like a threat.
And so you've been warned. And I'm not making a physical threat. I'm just, you don't want to get close to this.
Yeah, especially if Libs of TikTok gets involved. He's not overtly, explicitly threatening violence with him, with his actions, but there's this thing, I think it's stochastic terrorism. I think that's sort of the subtext here.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's 30 hours.
They keep saying 30 hours. The tweet said indefinite. There was a timeline, but we don't know what's going on. Things aren't adding up.
Training course is indefinite, and there's no criteria by which it can be determined to be successful except theirs.
Oh, there we go. See, I cut it off too soon.
So how many hours are you going to do this if it's indefinite until you're retrained?
Oh, good question from Mikhaila. Basically, how long are you gonna go through with this before you quit and throw in your psychology gun and badge, and no, I will not stop being a gender critical asshat. I have to. It's my fundamental right as a Canadian.
Till whatever happens next happens. The goal isn't to retrain me. The goal is to get me to utter something approximating a public apology.
Pretty sure at no point has that been asked of him, a public apology.
I suppose we'll play out the charade until they decide that I'm incorrigible, and then they'll take my license, which is the goal anyways.
If they wanted to take your license, they would have taken your license. Let's be real. They probably have every justification to do so at this point, but they're still being so fucking gentle with him. I'm willing to bet he's just gonna get frustrated with it or realize it's not what he's not gonna be able to spin it into the thing he's describing it as, and so have to hand in the license or the registration or whatever in the big act of protest. I really don't see it going any other way.
What's your evidence that retraining a recalcitrant psychologist by exposing them to a social media expert makes that psychologist a better psychologist?
Oh, gee, Peterson, I don't know. Maybe this is uncharted territory and you would be the first case study to see if it's possible? Maybe? This is a novel situation. Of course there's not data on how effective this would be. Duh.
This person also an expert psychologist? And are they an expert psychologist like I'm an expert psychologist? Because I doubt it.
Why would they need to be an expert psychologist? Maybe so that they'd be able to evaluate the stuff he's saying as a psychologist. Contrary to what he says, the majority of psychologists understand that gender-affirming care is the appropriate treatment for trans and or non-binary gender-questioning youth. It's the appropriate treatment. It's the ethical treatment. It's the standard treatment according to the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, American Psychiatric Association, and on and on and on. It is the standard treatment.
And I don't regret what I said about the bloody climate apocalypse mongers. It's go to hell, you pikers.
Teaching Jordan Peterson about climate change, Part 1.
What happens next? Well, I guess we're going to find out. So I'll indicate my willingness to meet the expert.
It's not a good faith willingness to meet the expert. Let's be real here. This entire video is evidence of his poor faith in approaching this. He doesn't want to hear what they have to say. He just wants to go with morbid curiosity to see how bad it's going to be or whatever. Why is the college doing this? It's very clear he has no intent of acting in good standing as a member of the college. Why are they going through with this like this? I don't understand. Is it so he can't sue them about removing him as a clinical psychologist because of his free speech? Is that it? Because we already were there. We've seen how that lawsuit goes. So why are they going through with this still? I don't understand.
If the Canadian government passes Bill C-63, which is unlikely but possible.
Oh, what's that? Okay, so reading someone else. This is Tech Policy Press by Mandy Lau, who is a PhD candidate in linguistics and applied linguistics at York University in Toronto. And her dissertation explores the regulation of harmful speech on social media. So she sounds like a reasonable expert for this. So the types of harms that Peterson would probably be concerned with are content used to bully a child potentially, because he has shone a spotlight on at least one instance of a trans youth in a legal case with their dad. Content that induces a child to harm themselves, potentially, if it could be demonstrated that some of the bullshit he spreads on Twitter worsened somebody's child's mental state on the gender front. But I imagine the biggest one would be content that foments hatred or incites violence. Obligations of social media services, short of the Peterson Academy, that's not really his concern. Penalties are increased for existing hate propaganda offenses to a maximum of 5 years imprisonment, and then advocating or promoting genocide would be life. Max. Yeah, it would suck to be arrested, but it wouldn't be a life sentence. But again, it would hang on if he's communicating detestation or vilification, or if he's just expressing his personal thing. And again, that's where the college is concerned, because he's acting as a representative of this professional organization and saying the things he does. Given the government makeup, would be surprising if it passed, I guess.
I think that sums up everything. Do you want to end on a more positive note? That's horrible. I'm worried for you. I hope
Well,
you
I
do
can
it
end
over
on a
Zoom
bunch of
in
positive
America.
notes. I can end on a bunch of positive notes. It's like
12 seconds later.
my fellow citizens are being placed in a position where they have to decide to trust me or the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Do we trust the Supreme Court or do we trust Peterson? Now, in the US, that's a different discussion. Canada seems to have not gone the way we have. Lucky them. So I think that's a little bit easier of a call.
I'm thrilled with what's happened to Peterson Academy. I mean, maybe we'll have 100,000 students in 3 or 4 months. And it's going to be complex, but, you know, wherever there's a dragon, there's a treasure.
That's not true. Okay, I thought about it for a second. That's not true. There can just be strife with no whatever, unless he wants to spin the fucking resilience that you might be able to build out of the ashes of whatever bad thing as the treasure. Sometimes bad shit just happens and it sucks.
Yeah, I've been talking to some of my partners in crime, so to speak, about exactly how to go about this in the most upward aiming and comical possible manner. And we have some vicious plans in the works. Let's put it that way.
God, when he starts with this, like, ooh, super macho, tough, angry talk, like, and he just, like, flips into it. It's such a facade, and it's so obvious.
I would be very careful in offering up sacrificial lambs to the re-education process, because you're not going to be able doing the people that you hire to re-educate me or doing your college any favors. So let the games begin.
What does that mean? What is the subtext? What subtext is he intending to be put in there? Because, yeah, no, it doesn't sound great. What is he planning? What is he meaning by what he's saying here?
And that's not supposed to be, like you said, a physical threat. It's mostly that anybody getting wrapped up in this on that side of ideology is going to look back with immense amounts of regret.
We need to make it very clear for legal reasons that this isn't a physical threat. This is not a physical threat. Nothing will happen in Minecraft even. We need to make that painfully clear because it does sound like we're making threats. And realistically, it could potentially result in harm, especially if the social media person's details get leaked.
Well, you know what would be fun, I suppose, would be to just come down to Scottsdale and to work on our university project and to spend time with your mom and to play around with my music producer and to work towards the release of my book in November, We Who Wrestle with God, which I'm very happy about. And
I have no plans of tackling that book. You're seeing how long it's taken me to get through Beyond Order. And I am not a theologian. I was hardly raised Christian. I have no authority to talk on that at all. It's not my bag. There's plenty of people who can. Like Christian, atheist, Jews, like not me. No. I know my lane and I'm sticking in it.
like, this is really a blow to free speech in Canada. Like a serious blow. The Supreme Court has basically decided that the Charter of Rights is irrelevant in relationship to whatever the professional colleges want to do.
They rejected his appeal from the Ontario court decision that if you are a member of a professional organization, you are bound by its code of conduct that you know going into it. So yeah, like your citizen free speech is kind of set aside there. Yeah. And like you don't have to be a member of this organization. You could quit and you could say whatever you fucking want.
All regulated professionals in Canada have no freedom of speech.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
So that's terrible.
Of course, he's making this into you have no freedom of speech. Like, no, you have plenty of free speech as long as it's in line with the professional organization, which I guess it's a gray thing. Like, you still have your free speech, it's just constrained under what you can say, especially if you're going against that professional organization's guidelines on how to treat people as a treating profession. Like, duh.
Yeah, the re-education of Jordan Peterson coming to the airwaves soon.
Okay, thanks, Dad.
Yeah, thanks, kiddo.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I don't know what I was expecting. I guess that, roughly. Bottom line, the Supreme Court deigned to not accept his appeal request, and so he's big mad about it because now, if he wants to keep his professional standing with the College of Psychologists Ontario, he needs to go through that social media training, and it doesn't seem he wants to engage with that in any sort of good faith or even neutral faith. It's just bad faith and wanting to see how bad the clown show is. So my prediction is he might stick his toe in the water for a minute, see how it is, potentially see that it's not going to be the purple or blue-haired woke person who's giving it to him, but somebody who's fairly neutral and dipping, because it's not going to be something he can milk for content, in my opinion. And then make a dramatic show of turning in his badge of clinical psychology, and he's doing this because ethically they've strayed and morally they're in the wrong, blah, 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 blah. He's done a lot of time considering this, the possibility that he's wrong, but, you know, he's going to step away from the profession. So in addition to the lawsuit, there's this Bill C-63. That's a huge concern for him, and, you know, it's not clear that this is going to pass at all, and also if it would impact him or how it would impact him. In the beginning, they tried to frame it as being about 3 main things that the college received complaints for from people who were emphatically not his clients, as if the larger social forum doesn't get to have a say in things. Anyway, the gender critical stuff, the climate change denial, and being a Trudeau critic, even though the tweets he does, it's a bit more than being a critic. But if you look at how much time was spent talking about the 3 topic areas, it's pretty clear that there's one that outshines the other. He is very much willing to die on this hill and lose his professional standing because he fully believes that he's got it right and everybody else has got it wrong when it comes to the treatment, the medical treatment for trans and or non-binary people and youths. Particularly youths. Youths are people. I mean, obviously, but I phrased that weird. One would assume he engaged with this process, taking it to the Supreme Court of Canada because he thought he was right and he would be vindicated, that they would say like, oh no, you're absolutely right, Dr. Peterson. The College of Psychologists Ontario was wrong to try to rein in your speech like that. But they didn't. They didn't even hear it. They didn't want to hear the arguments. They just rejected it, which kicked it back down to the Ontario ruling, if I'm understanding things correctly, that he needs to pay the legal fees of the CPO and agreed amount of $25,000 plus his own. And he has to do the social media education program. He lost bigly, and at least from what he's conveying here, it seems like he hasn't taken that as an opportunity to reflect on maybe he's got it wrong. Maybe gender affirming care is in the patient's best interest in these cases. Given the way he talked about it, it seems like the social media training would be a waste of time because he's not going to change his mind on that. And I really don't understand why the CPO is committing to this process like they are. Like, it's a game of chicken and they're both trying to stubbornly win, and neither is going to. I guess time will tell what he means by the game being on, boys and girls. The gloves are off. I want to say he escalated in the transphobic language, but it was already pretty peak, so let's see where he digs from here. So yeah, that was this. I am still working on the next Beyond Order Rule 7 video of working really hard at something and seeing what happens. I guess he's working really hard at this and seeing what happens, or working really hard at not doing this and he found out what happens. The Supreme Court said nah. So look forward to that. Anyways, until next time, bye. And I will turn, because the kitty's back, Oh, there's a kitty. Kitty. So, leave you with the kitty, and bye.